Thanks, Will. How are you
How are you
doing?
doing? I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Not at all. Thanks a million for coming. I mean, the students' experience is obviously not what it usually is this year, particularly when it comes to things like filmmaking. So one of the few kind of advantages of the pandemic is people have been really generous with coming and talking, or staying where they are and talking. Indeed. So
Yeah,
thanks a million for making the time. Um, how are you? You've got young kids. How are you finding working in lockdown?
it's been a year of continuous adaptation and juggling. Yeah, so it's been exhausting, but we're well, and that's the kind of the only thing you can kind of ask for. But yeah, it has been exhausting, and it's amazing how we can adapt when we're forced to adapt, and you've no choice.
Indeed. Well, I sat my kids down yesterday to watch Wolfwalkers, and
Right.
there was an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 2-year-old, and they sat there quietly for an hour and a half, which is more than I've managed for the last 2 months. So
Oh, well, that's good.
congratulations on that.
That's good. That's good. I'm gonna have to see whatever's on downstairs will keep them occupied to the same
Oh,
for the
listen,
same level of time. So
there's always
it was a
danger of doors
yeah.
bursting open at any moment.
Yeah. I literally have safety gates set up in my outside my office door. So like when the gates are closed, you don't come in. But like I know if they do, it's an emergency. You
Okay,
know.
yeah, they're breaking the door down.
Yeah.
Um, But I mean, what genuinely was very impressive. They sat there entranced for an hour and 40 minutes or whatever it was, and I was just wondering about that process of writing for kids, um,
Yeah.
because it's it's something as a parent you see things they respond to and things they
I think
don't
you're mute.
respond
Can
to.
you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, you're mute.
Oh, can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yeah. Let me turn you up here.
Yeah, no
Are you
worries.
there now? There you are now. I can
Oh,
hear you now.
good, 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 good. No, just as a parent, you see things kids respond to and things they don't, and so just wondering about that from the writer's end about writing for kids. How you get into that space of thinking
Yeah.
about that audience.
Well, I suppose the first thing is like I'm never thinking about the fact that I'm writing for kids. I just think about we're just trying to tell the best story we could possibly tell,
Mm.
and uh, we have kind of children protagonists. So invariably, their view on the world is that of a child, and so they kind of bring the child's spirit and curiosity and wonder and joy even to 1650 occupied Kilkenny, occupied by the puritanical ruler. And like honest, that's sincerely, I'm my eye is to try and craft as entertaining a story for everyone, where we're all invested. I'm not just thinking about, this is going to get the kids. I'm more worried that, is this going to, are we pushing it too far for kids, or are we going to scare kids, are we going to alienate kids? But there's it's a kind of a balance. It's a balance of tone. It's about kind of like finding that kind of place where you feel that you can kind of you feel like you're not going to scare them too much, but yes, be constantly entertaining. That's the thing. It's just telling a good story and be entertaining.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But that I mean, the thing that both Wolfwalkers and Song of the Sea does so well is capture that childlike sense of wonder at the world that's around them. And is it hard to find that or does that come easy to when you're writing those characters?
Oh, it's easy enough for me. I think I just assume everyone's the same as me, but I have a very vivid memory of my childhood, a very, very vivid memory of how not just where things were, but how I felt about the world, how I remember thinking adults. I can remember feeling adults patronizing me and talking down to me, and I was going, "Oh no, I'm a bit cuter than you think I am," like.
Yeah.
So I have a very distinct memory that kids are often taken for granted for how sophisticated, but also how innocent they are. There's a duality. They're really sophisticated in some ways, but also their innocence is completely preserved. So, and but also a kind of an instinct to there's an instinct to find fun and find joy at all opportunities, really. So for me, it wasn't necessarily difficult, because it's I suppose it's a kind of a strong note, like a strong kind of aspect of my writing that I think I can kind of call upon, that I just assumed everyone else could do the same as I can do.
Sure.
So I've been fortunate in that regard.
I mean, I know you've mentioned like Studio Ghibli and My Neighbor Totoro in particular as films that influence you, or that you're very fond of. And I think for me, one of the, like, you see it particularly in My Neighbor Totoro, and that you see in Wolfwalkers and Song of the Sea in particular, because it's set in more contemporary times, you perhaps notice, is that coexistence of the everyday world and the fantastical world. And I think that's something that really resonates with kids, because kids tend to see the world through a kind of magical thinking as well, don't they? Where for what us is a box or a bush or whatever, for them they transform into something.
Yeah, yeah. My kids were just literally doing it. I just heard they locked themselves in the press there, and I don't know what was going on, but I just listened, and I was like, well, they've invented some worlds here. Like there's that, the creativity is always bursting, is always like desperate to come out and play with them. And you're citing like the Studio Ghibli stuff, and definitely for Song of the Sea, My Neighbor Totoro was a huge touchstone for us. That sense of finding joy and magic in the mundane and the wonderful. And again, it's probably calling from my own childhood, like where we used to go on like just adventures up the field, like with the neighbors, and we would come across. We would kind of you would just create your own crack and you create your own gallery, but then you'd find something kind of a little bit mysterious, and the instinct was always to make it scarier than it actually was. Like if we found a hole in the ground, well, it wasn't a rat's hole. It was like it was the worst badger you could possibly come across, or it was like a beast lived down there, that sort of way. So yeah, that's something we definitely pull upon, and that sense of again, it's the sense of kind of the joy and the eagerness to create the world, see the world through a magical kind of lens, turns the mundane into something wonderful and extraordinary.
Yeah, and one of the pleasures, certainly for me, of watching these films as an adult is it takes you back there.
Good.
You suddenly you're experiencing that world again. That idea of the magical there in the everyday. Yeah, no. So really, what I was hoping to chat about today was maybe just trying to get a little bit at the process and thinking about the career of a writer and the working life of a writer. We've been talking to people in some different jobs within the media industry more generally, and it's really nice for students, I think, to get a sense of of the process and of maybe some of the challenges, etc. Of those different jobs. So I'd love to just take you back to My Brothers, which came about when you won the pitching contest in the FLA. What year was that?
It came.
Or well, certainly it
2008.
well, you take it back before it came back.
The genesis of it came from the Huston, being in the school in the Huston, because I was doing the master's in screenwriting program, and for that thesis, I know it's not there anymore, but we had a kind of a screenplay thesis was our kind of main big project for the year, and I had come up with this idea for this kind of gothic comedy, this big plot monster of a film, this kind of gothic comedy set in rural Ireland, and I kind of got stuck into it fairly early on, and I was stuck with it through all the different outlines and all that sort of jazz, and very quickly grew to hate it in every possible way. I absolutely detested everything about it. And as the deadline for my kind of final thesis loomed, I during the summer months, I remember hating it so much that I had this instinct of I just want to write something simple and small and honest, with a very, very like basic plot, but it's truthful. There should be something truthful about it. And it was in that the genesis of My Brothers kind of came, because there were things going on. Well, I suppose things stirred up from my own past around those same months, and just the idea of these kids going on an adventure it was basically again something that kind of was born from my childhood and my own experiences with my brothers, and that kind of became the kernel of the idea for that story. Now, what happened was when I finished the Huston, all of a sudden that year I had in Houston was just absolutely magical, because it was the first time in my life where I was given the license to be able to immerse myself in film in a way that I'd never done before, like a chance to actually say, your day job is to study this medium, is to study these and to study how you could possibly tell these stories, and like we had people coming in from the out, like like guest speakers. I suppose like I'm doing a guest speech today, but like professionals in the industry coming and talking to us, and it all of a sudden made the possibility of getting into the industry that little bit more real, because you saw the person and you spoke to the person who was actually doing it, rather than being this kind of like vast void that was impossible to cross. It felt like it was a very, very possible, even though you didn't know how. It was the path to actually going to the industry wasn't quite clear, and still isn't, and never is. But it felt tangible. So I said when I finished the Huston, I had to, like, you're not coming out with a job in your pocket, or there's no internship or anything like that. It's kind of like when you go out. So I just had to return into the real world and continue to make money the way I was making money beforehand, which was by working in a medical device factory up in Medtronic, outside Galway. And but I went back with a kind of an intention in my mind to say, right, I'm going to continue the momentum. I don't want to lose the momentum of the year in the Masters with the people I'd met and the fun I had, and I just don't want to just finish and just lose that momentum. So I said to myself, right, okay, I need to pay the bills, but I want to try and make sure I have goals, or I have like something that I'm aiming for. And I think it was probably during that year that the Galway film, the summer I was doing my thesis project, I was floating around the Galway Film Fleadh as well, and kind of had an eye on some writers coming to us saying that they'd won the pitching award. And I kind of went, Jesus, you know what? That'd be a good target to aim for, is to get a submission into the pitching award. And that's as far as I thought. I hadn't thought like, a big game plan or anything. I just said, just focus on getting a blind submission into the pitching award for next summer. And that's what I set about focusing on. And I was fortunate enough to be a part of a Galway writers group, which I think is actually still might be running. I don't know how it's actually operating now, but it still might be up and running. And it was being kind of curated by Christian O'Reilly at the time. And that was we met every 2 weeks, and that was a great way of kind of keeping the momentum going. We were just talking to other writers and other creative people, but it was just about encouraging each other, really, and just keeping your foot in the door, or not in the door, but in the kind of that headspace, really. So I worked up an outline which was bad, and eventually whittled that outline down to something that was a bit of a pitch that I kind of felt was a good starting point, and submitted that to the Fleadh, and I got shortlisted. And Jesus, being shortlisted was the best and worst news for me, because I was delighted to kind of to get the acknowledgement and get the the opportunity, but also the reality hit, and it was the terror, the actual stage fright of having to go in front of an audience and pitch for. Back then it was just 5 of us, and we'd pitch for 10 minutes, and the terror was awful. And I actually got physically sick, like I was in hospital and all that sort of, got like genuinely, wow. I don't know, was it just coincidental? My body just was just pure, like, I can't do this. And if I could have pulled out, I would have pulled out, but it was too late. But anyway, I just worked my ass off. I was so terrified. I just rehearsed and worked my ass off, and pitched it successfully enough and won that competition. And it was from winning that, the next step was, okay, well, what do I do now? And I said, well, the film board give commissions for writing a script and development money. So I said, well, I'll throw this into the film board and have a meeting and see what happens. And the exec who I met with is Andrew Meehan. He's not there anymore. But Andrew took a big punt with me, and he says, "You're sure, look, go on, give it a go." And I stayed. I was still working in the factory, like when I went off in order to try and develop write the screenplay for the feature. And I'd say I spent the best part of 9 months writing the script, and I had been assigned a script editor, which was Paul Fraser. He'd written a lot of Shane Meadows' screenplays, and
Yeah.
he had given me notes on my first pass, and then I went away and did another draft. And basically, on my second draft, I submitted to the film board, and the film board, Andrew. Well, I was kind of reluctant to submit it because I was still anxious and nervous, and I thought it wasn't, I didn't think it was good enough. And I had a meeting with him, and he said, "Look, just submit it anyway, and I'll have a read." And I remember I submitted it over the weekend, and on a Monday I was sitting inside on the factory line, and I remember my phone vibrating in my pocket. And because it's like a clean room environment, you can't take out your phone or anything like that. So I was just going, "Jesus, who's that ringing me now?" And I skedaddled out and got the phone out, and I saw it was from the film board, and I went, "Oh Jesus, this is bad news now." So I went out and I rang him back, and he said, I was standing in a kind of a gravel car park, and he said, "Look," I said, I don't make these calls too often, but I'm glad to make it because I read your script last night, and I wanted to finish reading it around 2 a.m, and I wanted to ring you then, but to tell you that I've hardly ever cried at any script in my life, and this is the first. Let's say this is one of the very few scripts I've cried at, and I want you to know that I want to try and get this made, to help you in any way I can to get this made." And he said, "I want you also to know that it never happens this way. It never ever happens this way. So just be grateful for it." And he was right, because it never has happened that way ever again, ever again. But that was kind of my big break, really, and how I got into the industry.
That's amazing. There's loads I'd love to come back about there. I mean, just going back to so this was My Brothers was the script you did for the final MA project.
No, I didn't. No, I had a different story, a different script, and I submitted that, and it was terrible. But I had My Brother's idea, so I had the other idea.
Oh, the other thing you hated, you ended up submitting anyway, did you?
Oh, I did, yeah, because I got so far down the road with it. Yeah. I just went off. I rewrote it like 2 weeks before submission, and like I didn't get a great grade, but rightly so. It was not great, and but it was My Brothers was the one that was kind of moving me forward.
But I think there's probably something quite important there about having to write the wrong thing to write the right thing.
Yeah.
That it can become sometimes it can be very disheartening when you feel you've wasted all this time, but you actually haven't wasted that time. You learned something.
Oh geez, everything I write, every email I write it wrong the first time. Like, I'm one of those people, I just can't write. I'm awful on Twitter because I just get it wrong the first time. So I just I do a couple of drafts on Twitter, and anyway. But yeah, you're totally right. That's a part of the process where you have to do multiple drafts, and I've kind of become comfortable with that now. I've become comfortable with the knowledge that I'm better off to just get something down as fast as I can. As bad as it is, just accept that it's awful and just get it down on the page, because then you've something to work with. It's much harder to stare at a blank page, and you're never going to have anything to work on or to make better if there's nothing. So at least if you've got something, you can kind of build and you can work. And that's been a big touchstone. That big kind of like, it's kind of it helped me deal with the terror of just being bad. I just accept that I'm bad, and I just work at making myself better. And that's it.
I think that's a brilliant thing for people to take away, because I think that fear of mistakes and of it being bad can be so crippling.
Yeah.
And you said that you even when you submitted it, you're convinced it wasn't good enough, and then you get this incredible validation of it. I mean, as you've gone on and you've gotten more experience, have you gotten better at knowing when it's good?
I still think I'm bad most of the time. But I've gotten familiar with I've basically gotten used to the kind of a different side of the process. I've gotten used to the instinct where when I'm writing something, and it feels exciting to me in the moment, right? I'm in it and I'm loving it, right? But then I lose faith in it afterwards. I lose faith in the. I kind of go. I give I have second doubts and I question myself and all that sort of stuff. But invariably, the weirdest thing is that whenever I get that instinct when I'm writing, it's usually a sign that something's working. And maybe I don't know what's working, but something's working. And I have learned that that's really it's an instinctive thing. And I've now become much more. I've become less about the manuals, the like the Robert McKee storybook. Has not been picked up since I was at his conference, and it's all about how does this feel initially? How does it feel to me? And if there's a strong pull, if there's a sense of entertainment, or if there's a sense of I'm getting the right emotional reaction from this, whether it be joy or terror or intrigue or whatever, then I'm doing something right. And it's very strange, but then I can kind of once I trust that, I kind of have to have faith that someone else will resonate with it, and it's a bad answer, but but I still have incredible doubt. I still feel like I have imposters. I definitely suffer from imposter syndrome, and I'm just constantly waiting to be kind of like shown for the terrible writer that I am.
It's funny. I was just talking to a friend about this, about my own writing process of writing academically, and there's always there's always a stage where I hate myself and hate everything, and think, what am I doing here? But I've gotten to recognize that that's the stage just before it gets good. So
there
now
you go.
I kind of take a step back and go, oh, this is the bit where I hate myself. Okay.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's it. It's like, you always say this. It's my wife saying, you always say that, but like, but do you really hate it? And I'm like going, is there something there that you kind of like go, what are the things you love about? What are the things you love about it? Yeah. It's just about making it better. It's just about putting the head down and just reworking it and editing it and shaping it up, and just it's amazing how little tweaks can make a huge difference, huge difference to any document.
Yeah I always think of it a little bit like kind of chiseling, where suddenly something just emerges. You're like, oh, that's what it was.
Yeah. And I actually a couple of years ago I did an art class, like a really basic art class, because I was just trying to, I had notions when I had free time, and some of the principles and ideas that they were teaching me in that art class worked with creative writing. I think with all kind of any sort of creation, where it's very much about the first kind of stages are kind of loose, and they're saying just throw something down quick, just throw it down quick, don't think about it, and start looking at it from different angles. And it's all about changing perspective. And I think when your critical brain can really hamper you. So I think when I'm writing creatively, I do a lot of work to try and park that and put it to one side, and I consciously kind of create a space in my head which allows my kind of creative brain to a little bit of freedom to play, a freedom to be loose and to fail. That's a big thing, and to feel like there's no such thing as failure. It's you're creating something, so there's no such thing as failure. And your editorial brain can come in, be engaged, and can work on something once you have something created. It's an interesting process.
And how you talked then about Paul Fraser being your mentor, and he went on to direct My Brothers.
Yeah.
And Paul Fraser is someone who, of course, has written screenplays for Shane Meadows, and has a very successful career. What's it like? That how do you experience that process? And and is there ever like a challenge in? And I guess partly this comes down to the what you're getting from the mentor, but keeping your own voice, maybe. Is there ever an anxiety around that?
It's
as feedback comes in, that you can lose the thing that is you in it, or?
Yeah, that can happen, and there are times, of course, like in any project where you if you're collaborating with someone, it's kind of like it's like a marriage, really, or it's a relationship. It is a relationship, and if you're in agreement, I think a big thing that I learned from working, let's say, with Tom Moore, will say, the big thing I learned is if you have a very clear idea of the tone of the project that you're trying to create, or you're the tone of the piece, rather than the plot. The plot's something that you can debate right up until the very end. But if you have a very kind of clear and united idea of what you're trying to achieve tonally, then you're off on the right foot, right? If they're not right, then you're going to find conflict very, very quickly, because you're seeing different films. You're seeing films in different genres. You're reading the script, but you're actually playing it out in different ways, and that's where things can come a cropper very, very quickly. And thankfully, I definitely didn't have it on Song of the Sea, even though at Song of the Sea we had wild kind of sprawling and kind of like lost drafts almost, but we knew from the very get-go what the tone would be. And for my brothers, I was such a novice that I was just glad to have someone who had experience under his belt that could say, well, no, we'll get away with this. You'll be all right with that, or you don't need this, or and all that sort of jazz. And of course, then the closer you get to production, the reality is that someone is adapting your script, someone is adapting your screenplay. So that, I think, that was a hard thing for me to understand. That not to understand, but to come to, I understood it in a kind of a logical point of view, but I didn't. It's still something that it's a part of the process where you have to realize that you're just one part of this entire endeavor. You're not writing a novel, and you're not the sole author. You're one of the most important authors of this thing, but ultimately for a feature film, you have to kind of relinquish control. You have to allow someone else to come in and adapt your work in the way that they see they need to adapt it, for budgetary reasons or for however they see stuff. And that's one of the things that I suppose I did learn on that shoot, that you just have to learn to kind of put your hands up and kind of say, all right, okay, it's not my child anymore. It's gone on someplace else,
And is that a difficult thing? Actually, I asked my 8-year-old daughter, did she have any questions for it? And her question was, what do you do when they're making the film? Do you stand there and fret, or do you walk away?
In live action, there's a bit of weirdness. Well, like in that feature, there was a bit of strangeness where you might stuff might appear, and you go, that's not how I saw it. And you still have to just go, bite my tongue, and just kind of go, I'm lucky to be here. This is okay. Yeah. This is it's not my call. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna cause any ruckus, because I saw it in my brothers. I saw that experience as being kind of like a film school for me, and I kind of was just said, right, just soak it up and see what's going on here. But then I suppose as I go along and I got more confidence in the storytelling, you kind of have to learn what my role is, which is basically to be someone to help steer the story to make sure it works, right? So in my collaboration with on Song of the Sea and Wolfwalkers, no matter what I wrote on the page and what I imagined in my head how it would look, what would come back to me in the storyboards through the team was always just way better than anything I ever imagined. It's the only times there may be moments where where I get it, where I would get a sense that, oh, hang on a second, we're forgetting. The only times I would kind of flag stuff up was if it's to do with character, if it's to do with a performance thing, where we might have an editing beat where, hang on a second, we need a longer beat for such and such a line to land, or such an emotional. We have to remember where a character is in this scene versus that scene. They can't be kind of jumping around. If they're just after losing their favorite pet, in the next scene they can't be kind of skipping around the place having jollies because they're worried, they're carrying the weight and the worry of their pet, which can happen in an animated film, because storyboard artists are dealing with like different parts of the script, and they mightn't have a clear they might be like have a clear understanding where the character was in the previous scene or whatever it was. So those are the only things that I really have to come in and not come in, but just will flag up really.
Yeah. Sure.
That's all.
You talk about tone, and tone is something I found comes up a lot talking to filmmakers, the importance of tone.
Yeah.
And it also seems, though, often something that's quite hard to communicate or to grasp. Like for example, filmmakers talk about like critics often not getting tone in some ways, not, when they're writing about films. And I'm wondering, working in animation, does it maybe help that process of ensuring everybody understands the tone when you're sitting down with the people who are visually creating it at that moment in a different, it seems like a slightly different workflow, you might say, to live action, where you have the script, then you create the visual artifact.
Tone is so important. I really do find we had the kind of like we had two examples in between Song of the Sea and Wolfwalkers. We had two separate problems. In Song of the Sea, when Tom approached me, when the cartoonist approached me there's a story about how I got working with them actually as well, which I probably told you before, Con, but some of the students haven't heard it. But tonally, when myself and Tom started working on Song of the Sea, our first kind of story meeting day, they had already knew that they had to drum together a kind of a conceptual trailer for the film to try and get finance to get the thing made. But Tom was going to continue his collaboration with Keela and Bruno Collet, the guys who'd done the music for Secret of Kells. But they had Tom had a track, an unreleased track from Keela called Dee's Song, I'm pretty sure it was called. And he laid this track over the rough animatic that they were putting together for this conceptual trailer. And I remember on our first meeting, he said, "Oh, I want to show you this," and he showed it to me. And as soon as he played the song, I knew the tone of the film. The tone of the film was absolutely clear, and we knew, and the tone of Song of the Sea was never strayed from that very first meeting. We knew exactly where we were headed. There was a lovely melancholic baby fairy tale like vibe to it. Sure. And it was totally clear. And as I've already mentioned, we went and I wrote drafts that were completely, like almost not useless, but like, Jesus, we went on wild tangents all together, like, now I'll contrast that to our experience on Wolfwalkers, where in Wolfwalkers, on our very, very first meeting day, we pretty much had all of the plot figured out. I'm not saying we had all the plot, but we had a fairly substantial, the big poles, flags stuck in the ground for what we wanted to do with the story. And it was good, and it was engaging, it was exciting. And I was looking forward to it because it was going to be different to song, and it was going to have more beats to it, and it was going to be just structurally more exciting, and it had a fairly vivid pace, like, But we came out not with no kind of consensus, or not really having a discussion about the tone. And I went away, and I knew, and I worked up a treatment for that. We all agreed on the treatment, but then I wrote my first draft. And my first draft, in my head, the tone I wrote was, I said, I'm going to write a dark Irish Western. And that's what I wrote. I wrote a dark Irish ninja Western. And the end of the film actually is still, the final act of the film is very close to that tone of that first draft of mine. But when I submitted now, I wish it was a fairly entertaining draft. Now it was a tight script, and I was actually fairly proud of it. But everyone was going, "Oh my God, it's so dark! It's so dark! It's so heavy!" And I was going, "Yeah, isn't it? It's so dark." And so we knew that we had to figure out, we had to massage the tone and figure out the tone and stuff like that. And that was kind of like the one of the biggest challenges, was trying to find that balance and figure out that tone, which there was never even a discussion on in Song of the Sea. Not with a single discussion about tone in Song of the Sea, but it became something we had to figure out in Wolfwalkers. And I think if we had figured out, and how we figured it out was by not using music, but we used film references. So the film references were The Witch, right? Dave Eggers' The Witch meets Son of Rambo. Okay. And that's how we found the tone of Wolfwalkers.
That's they're great references. The Witch, my own personal story about The Witch is when my last daughter was born. I came home and the first film I watched was The Witch. It's
Oh
not a film to
gosh.
watch when your child is just
Oh no. Oh no,
but
that's
um, but I mean, you were talking there about not being afraid to fail, and you know, and about just writing uncritically. But
yeah.
when you're doing that in a collaborative process, I'd imagine that needs to be a very trusting relationship to
Oh
not be
yeah.
afraid to fail in
Yeah.
front of those people, as it were. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, again, that's a build up of a relationship and a friendship, and um look, I suppose it started in Song of the Sea because we'd worked so closely together on Song of the Sea, and myself and Tom, that we had a bit of a short end where we it basically, it's when you have a short end with someone, when you're friendly with someone, your inhibitions kind of go down, and you aren't afraid of coming across as a fool, because you kind of are a bit of a fool around each other. You kind of we just mess, and we would have the laugh and all that sort of jazz, and so slipping in and out of casual talk and story talk was effortless, and so you can easily say something stupid because you were kind of expected to say something stupid.
Mhm.
And like that's comes from building a trust and relationship. And I suppose, like, it was strange then on, not strange, but it was different then on Wolfwalkers, because Ross hadn't worked in the studio. Ross Stewart, who was the co-director of Wolfwalkers, he hadn't worked in the studio. He'd been away at Leica, I'm pretty sure, working on things like paranormal and stuff like that. And so Ross and Tom had done a part of an anthology for an animated movie called The Prophet. And on that experience, they said, "Oh, why don't we just co-direct the next feature together? It'd be easier for Tom as well." And so then there was, the three of us had a different dynamic, because there was Tom and Ross and me, and so all of a sudden the kind of like the shape of our exchanges kind of not changed, but we had a different energy about us, because that's just the way humans are. Our energy changes, and we became much more focused. But I think how we overcame that was because we spent a lot of time on Skype calls just chatting, and we would talk to each other so much that everything that came into our head just kind of spilled out. We went through all our bad ideas together, and there was no fear of saying something stupid, you know. Um, and because we were always saying something stupid,
Yeah.
and we trusted each other. That was another thing. We did trust each other, and I think that's very important, because as soon as you start, your critical brain starts kicking in, and you're not allowing yourself to be silly, then you're not allowing yourself to be creative. And I think that's a sign of where, or I know I won't produce my best work if I feel like there's someone looking over my shoulder. If I'm doing an exam and there's a lecturer standing over my shoulder, I won't be able to write anything. I just freeze up. I just need to have that sense of that's a sense of safeness to be able to create.
And it does speak to, I think, and this is something that I think we always say to the students about the importance of relationships, essentially, and building
Yeah.
up relationships with people that you trust, and like that. I always use the term creative community, that it's really important to build your own creative community,
Yeah.
and that those relationships that can persist over time.
Yeah.
I just, by the way, if anyone wants to pop some questions in the Q&A, please do. I mean, just to talk a little bit more about constructing that story. I mean, in both Song of the Sea and Wolfwalkers, you're kind of delving into Irish myth,
Hmm.
and you're kind of trying to pull a story out of it.
Hmm.
I wonder, could you talk a little bit more about that? I was thinking in my head when I was just thinking about this question. I always, when I'm working with students about talking to them about, say, coming up with an essay or a dissertation, distinguishing between the topic and the argument. So,
Hmm.
the topic might be, I'm going to write an essay on Irish animation, whatever. But the argument is the core of the thing. This is what I
Yeah.
want to say, and
Yeah.
so if you don't get past the topic, it becomes a meandering thing. It's only when you
Yeah.
get to the argument that it has a core, it has a heart, it's saying something. And I'm wondering, is
Yeah.
that kind of analogous to to that process of
Oh, absolutely. I think you've really you've hit the nail on the head there. For us, for how we manage this. So we have mythology. We have like our kind of these kind of fairy stories up there, and how we approached it was right. Silkies, they change from being they change for like they're humans when they're on land, and they're basically seals and they're a seal, and we just kind of put that up on the board, and that's the thing, right? And that's the thing. Didn't really have to think about it all that much, because our job is to tell an entertaining story. Is to then Our job is to take a character on a journey, on an avatar. And it wasn't about silkies. It's not a film about silkies, or no, neither of them are about. And Wolfwalkers is not about werewolves. It's about what do we want to say, and it's about what does the character and how is the character going to verbalize that. And if we just made a film about silkies, you could just do a documentary about silkies, but it would have no. You could easily do one that doesn't have any entertainment value, but no information or no character. No, sorry, loads of information, but no character, no emotional engagement. And our job is to entertain primarily and tell an entertaining story as a storyteller. So we make it as simple as possible. Make the kind of the lore as simple and digestible as possible, and make the characters as interesting and as complex as possible, and have everything come from the character. The themes come from the character. The plot comes from the character, because of the character's actions creates the plot. And the myth is a thing that's there, but it's not essential to it. We could have still told that story. We could tell that story in contemporary times, the most important thing is about the characters and what we're trying to say. So essentially, yeah, what you're saying is, yeah, the topic is there, but it's your argument. What are you trying to say? And what is the point you're trying to make? And what do you want people feeling when they finish watching? What's the emotional takeaway you want an audience to have when they're coming out of this film? Do you want them to feel elated? Do you want them to feel thrilled? Do you want them to feel like entertained and having laughed their asses off? It's having that at the forefront is really important. And so when I came on board, both of definitely I remember on Wolfwalkers, I remember just kind of going, I didn't know about the myth of the Wolves of Ossuary when I came on board, and they just said, well, this is the legend, and I went, cool, okay, let's talk about the characters and what's the character story. And that's where I straight away started focusing on who are the characters and what's their journey, what's going to happen to them, and how can we get engaged in that, and how can we tell a cool story using these characters in this setting with this kind of cool mythology in the background. And that's, I don't know, does that help with what you're asking?
No, totally. And I'm wondering, I mean, because one of the things that your three features have in common are these really great relationships between young people at the heart of them, from my brothers onwards. And I was just wondering about that process again of those characters emerging and the relationships between them, because the characters are both, they have their own characteristics as people, but really then it's the dynamic between those characters that creates the drama, creates the engagement. And I'm just thinking about the process of that.
Yeah, it's about I suppose all drama really is down to conflict, really. Conflict in some way, shape, or form. And I suppose it's figuring out what the relationships, what the character wants, not what it wants, but what painful truth. For me, it is really about what's the painful truth in a character. What's the thing that's holding them back? What's from kind of being a better version of themselves? What's the thing that's kind of causing the world around them to be poisoned or be destroyed that they need to fix? And I kind of start that as a starting point. And then I figure out, okay, how can I structure this and populate this character's universe with other characters that push and create tension in that for that character's kind of like status quo. And that's the essential kind of like makeup of how I kind of start figuring out and populating the world, when I'm starting off.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I'm just going to jump over to some questions here. Oh, here's one. Was screenwriting something you always wanted to do?
Nope. I started off wanting, I didn't know what a screenplay was until it was in my late teens, because it was a different era and screenplays weren't really prolific. You couldn't get them. The internet wasn't a thing, really. When I first wanted to get into filmmaking, I had the epiphany. I was passionate about cinema from when I was, knee high, but it wasn't until I was about 12 or something like that, when I was watching Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom, and I had an epiphany that this film was made by people. I just went, oh my God, it's not just Indiana Jones walks in front of the camera and just starts acting out. It's no, this is thought about. That's a camera shot. And I just all of a sudden could feel the action and the cuts, if you know what I mean. I could feel it. And I just went, that's what I want to do. I just wanted to do that. And as my interest grew exponentially throughout my teenage years, I kind of identified cinematography being the thing that I wanted to do. I wanted to be a cinematographer. But I had an instinct to write creatively. I had an impulse, not an instinct, an impulse to put words down on the page. And I never did it I always did it almost an embarrassment on for a private impulse, really. And it wasn't until I actually had started a film society in college. I did my undergraduate in computer science, and I started a film society in college. And through that, I got filmmakers in to show some of their own work. And through that, I got to be on set and see them making their own films. And they didn't know what a script was. I was in London. There was no such thing as a script, and it just goes to show that in Irish film, in back then anyway, in Irish film education, the script wasn't talked about. It wasn't really discussed, because the script still doesn't even get discussed. If you look at the special features of any movie or anything like that, the script's never discussed, because it's not sexy. It's not. It's like it's someone hunched over a keyboard for years on end, and it's just not entertain. It's not good visual entertainment, and so it just kind of is that. It's like a void layer. I think we probably get more. We get more a little bit more airtime now, but yeah, it's such a vital component. And it wasn't until I was on one of these sets, basically, that there was no script, and there was the guy who was supposed to come up with a script was trying to hammer a script together, and I just found myself going, "Come here, I'll help you out with that." And I found myself feeling kind of happy doing it, and I went, "Oh, this is actually quite comfortable," and I'm enjoying this. And so it was from that experience I started to tinker with it more and more and more, and I ended up becoming a screenwriter. So it's a very kind of weird way of explaining how I managed to do it.
It's great, because it just shows how it evolves and shifts over time. And I love that idea of just coming to something and suddenly it feels right. It feels, I feel comfortable.
That was it was following that comfort, that sense of, oh, I feel comfortable. I want to be on a film set, but I don't know where I feel comfortable on a film set. I wasn't comfortable shouting action and cut. I wasn't comfortable in front of the camera, and I just found myself comfortable in front of a keyboard thinking about. And also the disciplines of writing and editing are actually very, very similar. They satisfy an urge, an instinct to me. That discipline of writing and editing are very, very similar. So those are I think if I had to, those are two things I would be happiest doing on a film.
Sure. Well, maybe that answers already a question someone else asked. But do you see yourself directing your future screenplays at some stage?
I don't know. Like, honestly, I don't have the impulse. From my experience with Cartoon Saloon, I certainly love the collaboration. I absolutely love it. I love the voice records. I absolutely love it. But I've been on set of a live action film, and I just really, not that I didn't like it, but I just went, Jesus, this is an awful lot of pressure to try and get this in the can. Like the variables were so immense that I would only be happy doing it in a kind of I could imagine myself doing it in a kind of a nice animated, or not animated, but like basically where you're indoors and you have time to think about things, and you can have nice discussions and talk to nice people, rather than being outdoors in the rain and you're feeling bad because you're saying, geez, I've everyone out here now in the pouring rain. That poor person's like in front of a camera and it's fucking freezing. And I shouldn't try and get the best shot I can get. That's the thing. I would want to try and get the best thing I would want to get, but I would feel bad about imposing upon people to get the best thing. And I think you have to be I don't know. I honestly, so yeah, it's complicated.
I think you do. That thing you didn't say there. The what someone here is asking about your motivation to sit down and flesh out your stories when you're working another job. And I think I'd like to just expand that a little bit and ask about, you know, also that moment where you decided this is it. You know, you left that job.
Yeah.
Presumably it's a decision that's not without anxiety. Maybe just more generally about the life as a creative. You know.
Yeah, no hassle. What happened was how I became a full-time writer was back when the script from my brothers was getting basically when I got the phone call from Andrew Me and the film board saying, "Great, I want to help you get this made." It's like you hang up and you kind of go, "Amazing, now what?" Right? So now what? Well, what happened for me, which will never happen to anyone else, but it just happened to me, and everyone's course into the industry is completely unique and different, was that word got out amongst India in the film industry very, very quickly that there was this really exciting script that the film board were interested in getting going. And I had a call basically from all of the kind of the top production companies in the country, email me or rang me before the week was out. So I had a line of meetings being just like happening. And I had to take annual leave from my job to go. I was in Galway, so I would have to travel down. So I would have to take days off to go down to do these meetings. And what happened was basically I'd taken so many meetings, I ran out of annual leave days. And it was kind of that question of, but I knew there was enough interest after a few weeks. I went, geez, I think this is going to happen. I think this is going to be optioned by someone. And it was a case of, right, I suppose I have no days no days off I can take. I might as well should I just quit? So I just went, okay, I quit, and I quit it. And I was unemployed. I was like an unemployed writer without any option, but I knew there was interest. I knew there was enough of interest out there that I was possibly it was going to work. And this is how lucky I was in those first couple of years. Now I worked my ass off. Don't get me wrong. Like, to get myself to that point where I was in that job, I was writing that screenplay and thinking about that screenplay for 12 months, and it kind of dedicatedly I was diligent enough to work a job and come home at night and work on the screenplay at night. That's how we did it. But my first week unemployed as a screenwriter, I was lying in bed because I had no job to get up to go to. I was like technically a writer, and I just went, well, what am I going to do now? And I thought, well, you know what, the thing I'd love to do now is I'd love to write. I've written this like kind of gritty Ken Loachian kind of kitchen sink drama on the road movie, and I really want to write and animate something beautiful and animated like Studio Ghibli. That's the thing I'd love to do. And I got up and I turned on the computer and I had an email from Ross Murray, who was one of the co-founders of Cartoon Saloon, and he said, we're just about to finish. We're in the finishing process of our first feature film, and we want to get a writer on early for our next feature film. And the film board have recommended you as someone we should talk to. Are you interested? And I just went, Jesus, this is a bit coincidental. And I looked at they had a conceptual trailer for The Secret of Kells online. And first of all, my first instinct when I heard the title, The Secret of Kells, I just went, oh, not fan of the title. I was like, okay, this could be, we'll see how this goes. And when I saw the conceptual trailer, I just immediately just went, that's the thing I want to do. That's the tone that's the type of thing that I was imagining this morning. And within a week, I was down to Damien Kilkenny, and it was just a very effortless, organic meeting. It felt like it didn't feel like I had to work to get this job. It felt like I was meeting people that were my people. And we were around the same age, at the same kind of stage in our career, sort of thing. Well, they were around longer than I was, but we kind of felt like we were on similar paths and at similar stages in our career. And so that's how I got that. But then the reality of being a working writer and being how do you make a living at this thing, and how do you actually do it, find the discipline to actually do it, and all that sort of jazz. was something that took me years to, I'm still trying to figure it out, but I've slowly gotten a little bit more used to it. One thing is there's one of the awful thing about our job is that one, we don't, on this side of the water, we don't get paid enough for what we do. There's no question about it. We get asked to do stuff for free more and more and more, and it's awful. I've been fortunate enough where I've landed on my feet as such, and I've been working consistently pretty much for the last 10, 12 years at this stage. But that's not to say that it has not been difficult. Now, I'm one of the writers who is been consistently working and has been, I suppose, I've been relatively successful, right? I've managed to get 3 feature films produced, and I've done a Christmas special that's been up on Netflix, and I've written for TV and all that sort of jazz. But it's difficult because you get a commission, and you're getting paid for this job that you're doing. This job might take a month, it might take 6 months, it might go into production, it might not go into production. You literally are never really certain beyond 3 months. You're not, for me, I'm always, and I still to this day, I'm not certain about what I'm doing in 3 months' time, because I can't take it for granted. I just can't, because films fall apart. And I've just been fortunate enough that things haven't fallen apart. Like, a lot of projects, I can't remember the amount of things that I pitched on, that I've done treatments for, that I've, like, so many writers out there. We just have literally, we've rooms full of unproduced stuff, stuff that never got made or never got past the starting blocks. And so there's a real sense at times of despair, where you're kind of thinking, why in the hell am I bother? Why do I bother wasting my time and energy at this job that may or may not pay out, may or may not, and that's the reality of it. Sure. And when you do get something, yeah, you get paid, but then are you sure you're going to get something in 6 months' time that's going to keep you going? Right, the money you're getting now might be your only paycheck this year, which has happened to me. I think I've gone like a year without being paid on something. Maybe that's happened to me. There's a chance it has happened. So there's a constant sense of insecurity. There's no such thing as job security. But where I found my sanity is in the work itself, in putting my head down. And this is where a thing I'd like to share. I know there's people there all around the call who aren't screenwriters. I know there's people working in all different sorts of discipline. But you're interested in film, and invariably you're going to be working in freelance circumstance, and you're going to find it's going to be hard to get the motivation to work. And I used to, let's say, work for a day, right, and feel like you've had great work done for the day, and at the end of the day get an email about something falling apart, and all of a sudden your day goes to pieces, and you feel like, Jesus, that was a waste of my time, right? And then as a consequence, the next day might fall up. You might like kick yourself up the ass and kind of go in the dumps for the next couple of days, and a week could go by, and a month could go by, and you're kind of in a real rut. And I kind of knew I had to do something to fix that. I had to, for myself. And how I fixed it was I changed how I thought about how I manage my productivity, right? I saw my job as being something I had to do every day, right? My job wasn't to get a commission. My job wasn't to go out and be successful in the pitch every day. My job was to put the head down and work on work at my things and put the time in. So I said, the only thing I can actually control is the time I spend that I put into my projects. So I spent a few days and I timed myself. This is back in the days when we'd no kids and no pandemic. And I timed myself basically working from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. of how much time I actually spend working full on concentration and without emails and phone calls and breaks and all that sort of stuff. And I figured out that the average was about 3 hours. I said, 3 hours. And I said, okay. So I made it my mission back then, this is about 5 years ago, to put in 3 hours every day. 3 hours seems like a lot. It seems like a little, but then when you sit down to actually concentrate for 3 hours, you go, Jesus, it's actually hard to concentrate full on for 3 hours. So I broke it down and I said, right, all I'm going to do is 15 minutes. All I have to do is work 15 minutes and that's me done for the day. And I would start writing for 15 minutes. And when my timer would go, and I still do it to this day, stop my timer, I stop writing, and I put a little tick on my book, on my diary. That's 15 minutes done. And I'll stop for 2 minutes or 5 minutes or check my email or whatever it is. And then I'll say, right, just do 15 minutes. And I go back at it for 15 minutes, full on concentration, no distraction. And then the timer will go off. I go out and I check on the kids, make sure everything's all right and all that sort of jazz. And I come back and I would do that over and over and over again. And if at the end of the day, I feel like I've been distracted, I only got an hour done, I kind of go, right, give yourself another 15 minutes. And I'd find another 15 minutes someplace. And I might push myself up to it. So at the end of the day, I wasn't measuring my day's success on how many pages or how many words I'd written. I just measured myself on how much honest to God effort I put into my work. And that consistency, it's gas. If you put in consistent work like that, you will have a thesis done, a script done, a book written. Before you know it, it's gas how quickly the pages just kind of notch up. And it's just literally by putting one step in front of the other. So I kind of nullified the whole fog of war thing and just said, if I get terrified, because it's terrifying, and I just said, I'm not focusing on that anymore. I'm just focusing on the next 15 minutes. And that's all I can do. So I focus on that, and the work's come. The work has come all the time because I'm making stuff. I keep my head down. I try and keep working. That's a long-winded answer, but
that's absolutely amazing. It's really amazing. And I mean, as someone who myself tries to produce, I know how hard fought that battle can be, and I think I think that's so valuable to say that, to really strip it down and just think about those little blocks, because ultimately, as you say, that's all you can control. Listen, there's loads of questions, but I'm conscious of time getting on. There are 2 quick fire questions that I'd like to ask everyone. You've just answered the first, I think, which is can you describe a typical day in your job? But I think possibly you've just answered that.
Yeah, it's just literally getting up. Right now is getting up really early, getting pages done, and then reading stuff. It's just basically my typical day is juggling 5 projects at different stages of development. And that's kind of it.
The other question is, what qualities do you think you need to do your job?
I would say you need to be. I would definitely you need to be a compatible person. You need to have compatibility, because what I mean by that is you need to be able to work in a team, and because you're going to be sharing your work. If you're making a film, if you're writing a novel or something that's a solo gig, then it's fine. You don't need to be compatible. You just do your thing and you be the sole producer of that, and it will suit your personality better. But in the medium of film and visual storytelling, you have to collaborate with loads of people. You have to be open to accept notes. You have to be open to accept criticism, and that's an important aspect. You need to be obviously you need to be, for me, you have to be creative. You have to have a kind of a creative spec, or you have to have a bit of a creative soul. You have to be disciplined. Definitely, you absolutely have to be disciplined. And if you're not disciplined like me, you have to manufacture discipline. You have to create an imaginary discipline, some sort of system. That's why I came up with my strange, weird system as a way of creating this discipline system. And the big thing, I think the biggest quality is you have to have tenacity. You have to be able to go at it again and again and again, and go for another draft and another draft, and kind of even that's like with Wolfwalkers. I think officially I did 4 drafts of Wolfwalkers, but unofficially it was 9 drafts of Wolfwalkers. Wow. And I remember when I was doing a screenwriting course in Houston, I remember we were told about Richard Curtis writing 4 Weddings and a Funeral, and they said, oh, he did like 25 drafts or something like that. And I remember just going, oh, how did he pass? Oh my God, 25 drafts. And now I'm going, oh yeah, I can see, because guess what? Draft 1 is shit. That's the reason. So it's just like the mortification. I was just like, no, I have to make this better. So yeah, those are kind of some of the qualities I'd say you need.
That's brilliant. Thanks so much, Will. I think that's just going to be so valuable for all the students listening, and really appreciate your time.
No bother. It's great to chat.
Yeah. Let you get back through that stair guide there and see what lies inside.
There's been no noise downstairs yet, so they're either watching I came down last week and they were watching Avatar, and I just went, "Oh Jesus, what's an Avatar?"
Well, listen, I left my son doing what I thought was a Zoom call with class, but the Zoom call ended, and my 6-year-old son and 2-year-old daughter were watching Under the Skin. The so
Brilliant.
yeah,
Oh, brilliant.
that's been the highlight of homeschooling so far.
Very good.
Well, listen, thanks again, and
No matter.
we'll hopefully see you in the flesh before long. Tom.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I'd love to be down to Galway again, definitely.
Great. All right.
All
See
right.
you, Will.
All right. Cheers, Connor. All right. Take care, everyone.
All
Bye-bye.
the best.
Bye-bye. Good luck.